SHOT Show 2024, and I am here with Paul Bradley. Paul is a well-known British YouTuber and gun personality, and I'm sure he does a lot of other really cool things. We're here at Norma Precision, and I wanted to stop in and talk to Paul about what it's like to be a gun owner in Britain, and break some misconceptions and compare gun ownership there to America and to Israel, etc. And so, Paul, it's so nice to finally meet you in person. We've been friends on LinkedIn, we've been talking over there, and it's just really great to meet you. So tell us about yourself.
Okay, so started shooting at a very young age, started on 2.2 rimfire rifles for target competition, ended up shooting nationally and did a couple of international bits with that. Then got more into long range stuff and started doing my own ammunition development and moved through to like extended long range, specialist projectiles, really got into the ballistic side of things. At the same time I was working in private security, so I wasn't actually working in the firearms industry at the time. So I always also had the side interest of protection, self-defense, but in England the firearms and the self-defense can't really ever go together legally, because you've got no rights in England to use firearms for protection.
Right.
You could only do it if one came to hand at the time. So let's say you were cleaning your shotgun at 2 in the morning and a burglar broke into the house and you happened to have 2 shotgun shells there, you could argue that you were in fear of your life and you used the gun. But if a burglar broke in at 2 in the morning and you ran to your gun cabinet to get a gun to shoot him with, that could be a problem.
Right.
There's no facility to possess a firearm for protection.
And if I'm not mistaken, there was a case a few years back where a farmer in England had a shotgun and somebody broke into his house in the middle of the night, a criminal, and he shot that individual and killed him in self-defense, and that homeowner ended up in jail for a couple of years.
Yes, but that's a very weird case. It had some caveats to it that a lot of people don't know about. So the guy, unfortunately, they had repeatedly broken into his house. So he was being targeted. He was on his own. He was very frightened. That led him to become in a state of distress mentally. He then started waiting in the dark, armed with a shotgun, in his house for these guys to come in. Now that's the problem. In law, in the UK, there's no facility in law to do that. So by admitting that he had done that, he's in big trouble. Because now he's basically planning to murder someone who comes into his house.
To murder someone who's breaking into his house to attack him, he's going to murder them.
But that's how the law would see it. They're like, you've premeditated the attack. In self-defense in the UK, you can't premeditate like something that's going to happen in an hour's time. You can make a preemptive strike, but that's in the moment. So it allows for that. But if you're like sitting waiting with a knife or something because you think someone might come in half an hour, that's legally going to be a problem for you. So that's why he was taken down. It was all about the words that he used afterwards. If he had had some decent legal advice, he could have said, I was at home and I've been burgled many times and I got really frightened because I'm on my own and I'm old, and I thought, well, the only way I can protect myself is to run and get my gun out, which I did. And then I was, these shadowy figures came into my house and I shot at them. I couldn't really clearly see. Right. But he also said that they were running away and he shot them because he wanted to teach them a damn good lesson.
So that's a problem. By the way, even in the US, where we have solid self-defense laws, somebody who's running away, you wouldn't be justified to use lethal force if they're trying to escape.
Yeah, it's going to be a hard sell, right?
Yeah,
that's a courtroom of like...
To convince the prosecutor, a jury, that, and a judge that you were in the right there.
Unless they had a rear-mounted cannon.
You never know. Or if there were other guys that they had working with them that might have been coming from different angles, that maybe. Yeah. But that's going to be a hard sell. That's really awful to hear that the self-defense is really not a thing in England.
So there's no facility in England to have any weapon for self-defense, none. So you can't carry a knife for self-defense. You can carry a knife as a everyday carry object, less than 3 inches, non-locking. And if you were attacked and you happened to use
like a little Swiss Army knife, one of those really small Swiss Army. That would be okay to walk around with in England.
Sure. So I like commonly walk around with something like that, which is just a little.
This is considered okay.
Yeah. So it's not locking, doesn't lock.
Okay. So that's allowed in England.
Yeah. So you can all walk around with one of those.
Right.
You can walk around with a fixed blade or a locking blade if you've got reason. So if you were going fishing or a hunting trip, or you were working and you had to cut carpet or something like that, or a chef, then you've got like an exemption. But you must be sure that the exemption is proven. There's no point saying, I think I might go later fishing.
Can knives be freely bought and sold in England, or are they restricted? Is there licensing requirements for knives?
So they're restricted for sale on age. So I think it's under 18s, can't buy any knives. Other than that, there's no restrictions. There are some types of knife that are off the table completely. So you can't buy a switchblade, you can't buy any sort of automatic knife. Most types of assisted knives are now banned. You can't buy balisong, switchblade. You can't buy spiral, cyclone knives. There's quite a few that are. There's a lot of very strange ones that are banned, like a Kasiri Gamma, which is like an old Japanese weapon that's on a piece of rope.
Right.
I mean, what criminal's going to buy? Like, you would have to be so skilled to use that in a defence situation that you probably can kill people with your hands.
Right.
So having a rope with something on it isn't going to.
What about like military knives, like bayonets or K-bars, or like full-size commando knives? Are those?
Yeah, you can buy those.
You can buy that.
You can possess them. You can have them at home. There has just been a change in the law because there's been a huge spate of cheap machetes being used by gangs in London. So they've changed the law to say, I think it's anything over 8 inches, which also has serrations on the blade and has a hole in the blade, or more than one hole, would fall into this new law. Because it basically is targeting those like cheap Chinese import machetes that tend to look like the Book of Eli type machete. They're like badass or whatever, but that's what people do. So.
Interesting. Yeah, we hear all the time on the news about all the knife crime in England.
Yeah, but there's an interesting caveat to the knife crime in England that's never on the news, and why it's suddenly happening. There's a certain demographic that is committing knife crime, and it isn't people that have been living in England for the last 50 years. The demographic is people that have come from countries where it's incredibly common to attack each other with machetes and settle a basic street argument by hacking each other to death.
Yeah.
And then that's how they are, carrying on when they've moved to a different country, because they've moved, but their mindset hasn't suddenly changed.
And that's a problem with a lot of countries in the West when you allow immigration from a lot of these third world backward countries where people don't have concept of democracy, they don't have concepts of human rights, and it's all about survival of the fittest, and they're willing to use violence to get what they want. And you have that in Germany, you have it in France, you have it unfortunately in the US with our open borders with Mexico. You have all kinds of people who are coming here and doing all kinds of violent crimes, and nobody's doing anything about it.
And I don't actually blame those people, because that's just the situation they've been brought up in. That's how they survive.
Yeah.
So that they've had an awful experience, but I actually look at it as a governmental problem, that if you're going to import people from other countries, you kind of need to take the time to help them to socialise and to give them a full understanding of, like if I went to a strict Muslim country, I would make sure I've really understood the laws and regulations there, because there's things I could accidentally do that would get me in a lot of trouble. Maybe put me in prison for life. If I start kissing a guy in the middle of the street and
or drinking a bottle of alcohol,
a rainbow flag with a bottle of whiskey or whatever, then I could be in a lot of trouble.
Or if you're a girl running around in a bikini.
Right, or dressed inappropriately. If I wore my usual hot pants and string vest, I could get told off. So I try not to do that.
You have to be respectful to the cultures and the societies you're in. I mean, I've been to Muslim countries, and I didn't go to those places acting in ways that anybody would find inappropriate in those countries, and people from those countries should do the same thing when they come to our countries, to the West. They should show respect to our norms, But that begs another question.
I was lucky enough to have that information at hand though. If you've come from like the middle of West Africa, you probably need some governmental input because you might not have access to British etiquette and like how would they know that? So
Right. But again, that begs another question that maybe Western governments should think carefully who they allow to come immigrate before just open up the floodgates to anyone. Maybe we should be more selective as to which kind of immigrants and from what countries. I think it'd be a lot easier for, let's say, Britain or the U.S. to absorb immigrants from Ukraine, let's say, rather than from Sub-Saharan Africa or Pakistan.
It would make more sense. I always liken it to, I always see things through the eye of a security sort of minded individual because I work that there.
Yeah.
And I look at it as like inviting people around your house.
Yeah.
So if new people moved in down my street and I thought, I'm going to make friends with these people, and there was 10 people there, and I wouldn't just invite them all to come into my house at random and just let them walk around wherever they wanted and do whatever they wanted.
Right.
Because I know that even though some of them appeared nice, and some of them might have needed my help in some way, there may be a couple of those people that are really not nice and have some bad intentions, maybe robbing me or I don't know. So I'm going to make sure I'm very careful about who I let into my house, and I'm going to kind of assess them first before I make that offer. And then the other thing is, once I have let them all in my house, if two of them vandalise a room in my house, I'm just going to say to the whole family, I'm sorry, you guys can't come around anymore because a couple of you were disrespectful in my property, and that's kind of how I would treat the country. Like, you have, it's not right to sort of tar everyone with the same brush, but in security you really sometimes have to.
Right. Especially when people
no other way to
share
do
a
it.
certain religious ideology, which is fanatical and potentially destructive, and in some cases homicidal.
Yeah, and if it's to that extreme, I would always. It's like I've got two options. I can give people the benefit of the doubt, which is kind of the left-wing mentality of everyone's basically nice. The trouble is that everyone isn't basically nice, so that leaves you as the potential victim. Or the other side of the coin is everyone's potentially a criminal and has bad intentions, and if you're going to be distrustful of people, the good thing about that is you don't end up being a victim. So their feelings are slightly hurt. I'm not dead. I'm going to go with that option.
Absolutely. Tell us about gun laws in England and gun culture in England, because a lot of Americans have this opinion, they have this idea that in England it's completely illegal for private citizens to own guns, including for police. Even the bodies don't carry guns. Basically, the guns practically don't exist in England except for maybe the military, and the guns are totally banned. This is the idea Americans have, and through my research, I have found out that that's not correct, that there is in fact a gun culture in England, that there are quite a few gun owners, that while there is very strict gun control, there are a wide variety of firearms that individuals do own, and you are an English gun owner. And so I would like you to tell us about what's it like to be a gun owner in England, and what the law is like there in reality. What's it like?
Sure. So some of the police do carry guns. Just qualify that. There are firearms officers in the UK that definitely carry. They're generally carrying a pistol. Sometimes you see them with like a SIG MCX. So they're well armed, and there are plenty of those guys around. If you go to an airport in England, you'll definitely see them wandering around there.
Right.
Civilian gun ownership is a licence system in England, so you can ask for a gun licence for sporting reasons or for pest control, agricultural, farmland and stuff like that. You can get a licence for that as well. As I said before, you cannot ask for a firearms licence for self-protection.
So there's no such thing as like a concealed weapons permit like we have in America. You cannot get a license to carry a concealed weapon or any other weapon to defend yourself. That's out.
Yeah. So the license is granted to people that generally have a clean criminal record. They may sometimes have had some mild offences a long period of time ago.
Shoplifting as a teenager.
Yeah, things like that. So if you like were involved in some petty crime 10 years ago and now you've applied for a licence, the chances are you may still get one. There will be questions asked. But it's certainly become more in depth in the last few years because we've had a couple of mass shootings in the UK. So every time that happens, they revamp the licensing system. And in fact, the last mass shooting was a failure of the licensing system to capture that guy before he went and did what he did, because he committed some violent acts with a firearms licence. The firearms were taken off him with the licence, and then he was able to get the licence back. And he shouldn't have been granted it back because he had beaten up a 14-year-old girl in a playground, and he was a full-grown man. So
Obviously, somebody like that, I think most Americans will agree that a violent criminal who's going to assault a child should not have firearms.
exactly.
Yeah.
So what was bad about that was because that was a failing of firearms licensing. Firearms licensing then will become even stricter on all the legitimate gun owners. So they'll sort of take the governmental agencies don't want to take blame for things if they've made mistakes. So they're just going to turn up the heat on the legitimate firearms owners. You know, that's generally how it goes.
Right.
So if you're of sound state of mind, so they would. Sorry, I have to edit that bit. If you're in a sound state of mind, they will look at things like the social media, make sure you haven't got any terrorist views or psychological issues. They're particularly interested in like misogyny, because the last guy that committed a mass shooting was an incel, and his whole reason for doing it.
We had people like that in America also.
Yeah.
There was a shooting in Santa Barbara that actually made the whole concept of incels famous. Nobody ever heard of that term before that.
Yeah, same in England. Like it wasn't until this guy had done what he did that none of us even knew what that was. But then, obviously the police now focus on that. So they're looking at all that kind of stuff. If you can prove you're a member of a club that you do sport shooting, then you can get a license. That license will allow you to have centre fire, long guns up to 50 cal. So I can have a 50 cal bolt gun. If
Really?
I want.
You can own 50 caliber rifles in England?
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow.
Semi-auto, you're limited to rimfire only. So they banned semi-auto some time ago after a mass shooting. Again,
Dunblane, was that the one?
yes, I believe it was. No, was it? No. Semi-auto long guns were banned after the Hungerford massacre, which was a guy that went on a rampage. That was in the 80s.
In the 80s?
Yeah, I think late 80s. And then after that, pistols got banned, and that was in the Dunblane.
That was 97, I think?
Yeah.
Scotland?
Yeah.
So, you can't own pistols whatsoever.
Now they've gotten around that somewhat, a bit like in the US. They find ways around loopholes. So you'll see people in competitions with long barrel pistols.
Yeah.
So they basically make the pistol long enough by putting like a wire thing.
A strange thing that goes behind.
Stop, like
Right.
sits
An arm
underneath
brace
your
or
arm.
anything,
Yeah, that's it, like an arm brace. And then having the barrel long enough, so in effect it falls within the carbine classification and it ceases to become a pistol.
So you can have like a Glock carbine type of thing,
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
and that would, are there magazine restrictions?
So it's 2-2 rimfire, because that's the only semi-auto you can have.
Oh, so it has to be in
So
22
it has to be 22
So
rimfire.
you can't have like a 9mm Glock?
No.
Okay.
You can have, the only way around that one is you can have a muzzle loading pistol. So you see guys with like a revolver,
Yeah.
you can take the chamber off, like old-fashioned loading.
Sure, a muzzle, a cap and ball revolver.
Yeah.
Like what was it, the Ruger Blackhawk, is that one of them? I think the Ruger, not the Blackhawk, Ruger, was it Old Army or New Army? Yeah, there are companies that manufacture, these old retro type
Yeah, like
black powder revolvers.
Uberti and people like
Yeah.
that, they make those sort of things, yeah. So those are exactly the kind of things that you see guys that bring today. So pistol ownership is very difficult in England. There are some caveats to pistol ownership. So there's a couple of sections of the Firearms Act that allow you to own a pistol. You can either own a pistol that's like heritage or has got some sort of special collector's value, so it might have been a limited edition, model or something like that.
Maybe an heirloom from World War II or something? If
Yeah,
somebody
like
captured a Luger from
an
the Nazi
antique
yeah.
would fall into that category. And there's two ways you can own that. You can keep it at home, but you can never shoot it, and you're not allowed any ammunition for it. So it's literally just a collection piece, and that requires a firearms license. Or you can keep it at a specific range, which has this Section 5 ability, and then you can only go and shoot it at that range at a certain time. So there is some pistol ownership.
Right.
There's then something called a Section 5 registered firearms dealer, which basically means as the firearms dealer you can own pretty much anything you put in for. So there are pistols in the UK that are generally being used for sales to law enforcement, sales to military, sales to other countries, etc.
So we have something similar in the US, which is called Class 7 SOT. So generally, so in 1986 they banned the new registration and production of machine guns, fully automatic firearms.
Yeah.
So you can still own, like I own an Uzi submachine gun that was registered before 1986, and it's what's called transferable. So you can sell it to someone.
Yeah.
But nothing that was made after 1986, with one exception. If you are a Class 7 SOT, basically you're a dealer. You can make what's called a post sample. So basically, you can manufacture a machine gun, a fully automatic weapon, for the stated purpose of exhibiting it to law enforcement and military agencies. And then you can possess that so long as, and even sell it to another dealer, so long as you hold that license. So it's kind of sounds similar to me.
Yeah, simple. So in terms of ownership, you've got your long guns, pistols are pretty much off the table, shotgun ownership is fine. So the licensing system falls under two categories. The shotgun license, which would allow you to have up to a 3-shot shotgun. So you could have a semi-auto with like 2 in the mag, 1 in the spout, would be the common semi-auto. No more than that, unless you get it under a firearms certificate, then you can have a multi-shot shotgun.
So let's say you have a pump action, there are a lot of pump action shotguns, right? Let's say like a Mossberg 590, but I'm assuming you have to have a plug in the tube in the magazine tube to stop it from going
So if
past.
you have it under a shotgun certificate, it will be the 2 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. If you have it under a firearms certificate, you can have that for however many you like.
Whatever you like.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the semi-auto rifles, it's limited to rimfire.
Yes.
So basically 22 long rifle, when that includes 22 Magnum, that's also rimfire.
Yes.
So, got it. I see.
It's literally centrifies the issue.
The center fire. It's not the caliber. It's the whether it's center fire versus rim fire. Got it. Are there any restrictions in terms of features? Like we have in the U.S. and in certain states, there are banned features: bayonet lugs, flash hiders, pistol grips, barrel shrouds, collapsible stocks.
No, the only feature issue is anything that you could buy that would change the function into make it into a semi-auto or make it into a full auto.
And how widespread would you say is gun ownership in Britain?
I would say it's a lot more common than people think. There's a good shooting community in Britain. It's not a huge place anyway, but for the people that are there, especially in the rural areas, I would say younger people in the cities probably don't think that anyone owns firearms.
Are you even allowed to own a firearm in London or in a big city you are?
Yeah, as long as you can prove, hey, I go to a club or
Are there any ranges for civilians in London?
Yeah,
Really?
absolutely. A lot of them will be in cities. You tend to find like old railway tunnels that have been converted into a shooting range, places like that.
Interesting.
So yeah, and clay shooting, of course, there's playgrounds around the country. There's game shooting that goes on around the country. But I live in a rural area, very farm, quite remote.
Right.
So around there, everyone shoots. It's incredibly common. And then even the people that don't shoot, they go to the shoot. So there'll be people that go and beat and the stuff surrounding the shoot. So they're very easy.
So you hear that, folks? We have it firsthand from a British gun owner. There are guns in England. There is a gun culture in England, so it's not totally banned. Now, following up on that, I wanted to put something forward to you. I have come to the conclusion, after thorough research, that the gun laws in Britain, as well as in Australia, are less restrictive than in Israel. I'm originally from Israel, and I just want to give you an example here, and you can give me your honest opinion if you agree with my assessment. In Israel, only about 2% of the population is eligible to apply for a firearm permit. Now, within that 2%, you have to fall within several categories. It has to do with where you live, or prior military service, if you served in certain units, or if you retired at a high rank in the police or military. There's a few other categories which would allow you to apply. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to receive the permit. I'm one of those people who applied. I fell into the category, was denied without a reason. So many people are denied. But within that 2%, it is only for one pistol, and up till recently it was 50 rounds of ammunition. Recently, since October 7th, they increased it to 100 rounds of ammunition. It has to be renewed every year. So there are no rifles or shotguns, there are no long guns whatsoever for private ownership, only for the military, security, law enforcement, etc. So that's the gun system in Israel. The far majority of the population is totally unarmed. You're allowed to own knives and pepper sprays, tasers, things like that, what they call cold weapons, batons. That they're not very strict about. But anything that actually shoots, any kind of a firearm, aside from those 2% of the people who can obtain a pistol permit, are completely prohibited from any private gun ownership whatsoever. So in your opinion, as a British gun owner, would you agree with my assessment that you have more gun rights in England than you do in Israel?
Oh yeah, much more. Like anyone who isn't a criminal can apply for a firearm and get a firearms license, in theory. We have access to the guns that you guys don't, so you say shotguns are off the table. They're probably the most common firearm in the UK. And in fact, the shotgun license in the UK, the firearms license is viewed by the authorities as a privilege. The shotgun license isn't quite viewed as a right, but it's like they have to find a really good reason for you not to have a shotgun license. Whereas with the firearms license, you have to give them a really good reason to want you done.
But I can tell you this, as someone who grew up in, I grew up in the town of Kiryat Arba, which is what they call a Jewish settlement in the West Bank, right next to the city of Hebron, which is a Palestinian city of over 200,000 people. It's a Hamas city. There were constant terrorist attacks, shootings. I saw people getting killed, shot right and left. I was in many, many gun battles, both when I was in the army when I could shoot back, as well as before the army when I couldn't. I didn't have a firearm. And I can tell you this, the idea of being able to have even a shotgun, or even a 22 rimfire semi-auto rifle, or a bolt-action rifle, let's say a bolt-action Enfield, or a bolt-action Mauser 98K, things that are legal in the UK for those who have those licenses.
Or
a Barrett 50, even more so. That would have been a game changer in a situation where we're coming under attack like that, but we had no access whatsoever. Those pepper sprays and batons and knives that we could carry did not do anything and will not do anything against heavily armed terrorists, because they have fully auto AKs, grenades, RPGs. We saw what they have when they attacked.
Yeah.
And that was, a result of the extreme carnage. So many people died was a direct result of the gun control. So I'm glad you're confirming my theory that British gun laws are better than in Israel.
I'm shocked to hear.
Really?
I've always assumed. I think one of the things that that terrible day has kind of had happened is that people didn't know much about Israel in England. No one paid it much attention.
Yeah.
It wasn't really at the forefront of many people's minds.
Right.
Now it's become national news.
Right.
So people are starting to learn a bit more about it. Hopefully they learn a bit more about the history of the area, the ongoing conflict through time. So it's not like a simplistic answer that I think people had previously.
Right.
So it's educating some people, but even with this, I had assumed for many years that because it was an area that had some dangerous aspects to it in terms of two factions that are not getting on,
Right.
I assumed that both of those factions would have pretty free access to firearms in order to protect themselves.
Only one does, the other side.
Yeah.
Only the Palestinians have free access to firearms and explosives and everything they want. The Israeli civilians don't.
And I'm literally amazed by that.
And that's, in fact, why I moved out of Israel, moved to the U.S., and now I run a firearms training school. I'm an IDF veteran. I served in combat doing something at Fada. I was in Israeli police. No access to firearms. And here I have whatever I want, basically, pretty much whatever I want.
Yeah.
I just think it's shocking. A lot of people don't realize that because they look at England as the quintessential, like, gun-banned country. And in fact, Israel is much, much worse.
I always joke with the American guys I speak to because I'm like, they give me a hard time about being English and oh, you haven't got any guns and that. And I'm like, if you guys got many suppressors, and they're like, oh, it's really difficult for us to get suppressors. Well, oh, we can just get suppressors. So in the UK, we can suppress any rifle that we want, and there's no extra tax stamp, there's no like pleading with the government to have it. You just, so if it's like a 2.2 suppressor that got an air rifle, you can just buy that in a shop.
Right.
If it was a suppressor for a centerfire rifle, you just ask for a slot to be added onto your license, and then you go and buy it.
That's a lot easier than the US. Let me ask you this. What is the position of the British gun community, and I would say conservative, Englishmen in general, people all across Britain towards Israel? Are British gun owners, are they supportive of Israel?
The vast majority of the English people are supportive of Israel. Like if you did a poll and you got 100 average people, like 99 of them would be in complete support of Israel, and they are horrified by what happened. I think the problem comes is that doesn't sell newspapers. Like that's not a headline, is it? Oh, loads of people agree, that they are, hopefully that Israel can deal with this and eradicate the terrorist threat.
Right.
That's not a particularly exciting news story. So instead, they wheel out these sort of pink-haired, crazy left-wing screaming people that are having these marches and stuff, and that is a polarizing story that's going to get dissent from either side, and it's going to sell news. So I think maybe people in the rest of the world think that there's a lot of people in England that are anti-Israel, but actually it's massively the other way.
I've watched footage of these huge rallies in London, Piccadilly Circus, and it seems like the far majority of them are not Englishmen. They're Muslim foreigners.
So I would agree. Those rallies are made up of university students who are like, they'll go to any rally that there is.
Right.
Whether last week it would be the environment. The week before that it was women's rights.
Right.
Well, then they forgot about women's rights because now they want trans rights, so don't worry about the women's rights.
Exactly.
And they'll flip them,
Back and
change
forth or whatever's
thing
cool,
that they're supporting.
whatever's on
week.
TikTok that particular day,
And they're like, oh, we love gay rights, but now we support Hamas.
which throws gays off
Which,
rooftops.
will literally kill gay people, so they can't quite
Can't figure out
decide which way
one.
they're going on that.
Right.
And then the other branch would tend to be people that are quite hardline Muslim, and they are coming out in support of Muslims. No matter
Their own
what
people, we should expect.
situation. Yeah.
They're loyal to their own people, not to England.
And when we say, oh, there's lots of them, I saw this news story, that's a major city that's imported people from all over England to travel there, and they've massed like 100,000 people.
Right.
That's not a lot of people. It kind of looks disconcerting, but when you imagine that literally that everyone else in the country doesn't like what they're doing and isn't supporting that, it's quite a small minority.
Right. Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Paul, this was really awesome talking with you. I've been following you on YouTube, and I love your stuff. And I'm so glad we got to sit down and talk. And this has really it's been so enlightening, just hearing from your experience as someone in England.
Me as well, yeah.
Absolutely. I would like to, anytime you're out in the New York area, Pennsylvania, feel free to come out to my training facility.
Love to.
Shoot full auto, something I'm sure you can't do in England. You're always welcome anytime. And if I'm ever in England, I would love to go and visit you as well.
Oh, yeah, you're always welcome, man.
Thank you so much.
We've got a 2,000 metre range we can take you to, do some long range rifles. So.
I would love that. I was in England one time. I was in London for 5 days. I visited some relatives of mine there. And it was nice. It was very nice. I visited the Tower of London, and I would love to go back sometime. So it'd be trying to make
It'd be great to see you.
Thank you so much.
Take care, man.
Thank you.